All right, let's talk about a huge challenge. How in the world do scientists even begin to classify every single living thing on Earth? We're talking everything from the tiniest bacterium to the biggest blue whale. It's a fascinating story of discovery, a lot of debate, and this constant quest to get our picture of the world right.
So let's just start with a thought experiment. Imagine it's your job. You have to create a library, but for all of life. You're faced with this unbelievable, chaotic diversity. How do you even start to create order? Seriously, where would you begin?
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with our basic human instinct to just sort things into piles. Then we'll see why the first scientific attempts they weren't cutting it. We'll meet the guy who created the modern system we use today, take a quick spin through the 5 kingdoms he came up with, and then we'll get to the really weird stuff, the outliers that just refuse to play by the rules.
You know, way before we had modern science, people were already classifying organisms. But it wasn't some academic exercise, right? It was about pure survival. You had to know what you could eat, what might eat you, and what you could use to build a roof over your head. It was absolutely fundamental. So the first scientific attempts were, pretty simple. You had Aristotle in ancient Greece just looking at plants and going, okay, that's a tree, that's a shrub, that's an herb. It was a start. Then, fast forward to the 1700s, and Carolus Linnaeus brings some serious structure with his famous two-kingdom system. But, as we're about to see, it took another couple hundred years for R.H. Whitaker to finally give us the much more complete 5-kingdom model that we still talk about today.
So Linnaeus' big idea of 2 boxes, plants and animals, was a huge leap forward. I mean, it was so neat and tidy. But as our tools got better, especially microscopes, scientists started discovering this whole hidden world of tiny organisms. And pretty quickly, his simple little system started to completely fall apart. The thing is, Linnaeus' entire system basically came down to one single simple question. Does it have a cell wall? If the answer was yes, boom, it's a plant. If the answer was no, it's an animal. And you know what? For a while, that actually worked pretty well. But this is where the fatal flaws really started to show. All of a sudden, you've got super simple bacteria being thrown into the same box as massive, complex trees. You had single-celled organisms getting lumped in with giant multicellular ones. And then there were fungi, which eat by absorbing nutrients. And they were being called plants, even though plants make their own food. Those 2 boxes just couldn't handle the real messy complexity of life.
So the conclusion was pretty obvious. The 2-box system wasn't just messy, it was actually misleading. If we were really going to catalog the library of life properly, we were going to need a whole new system.
And this brings us to 1969, and a biologist named R.H. Whitaker. He came up with this really elegant solution. Instead of trying to force all of life into just 2 boxes, he created a whole new blueprint based on much deeper, more fundamental characteristics. See, instead of one simple rule, Whitaker used these 5 key questions. He asked, how complex is the cell? Is it just one cell or is it made of many? How does it get its food? How does it reproduce? And, this is a big one, what's its evolutionary story? This approach created a framework that was so much more accurate and logical for understanding all the diversity out there.
So using this new blueprint, all of life got sorted into 5 distinct kingdoms. Each one has its own unique identity, its own set of rules. Let's meet them.
And you can see the logic right away, can't you? Kingdom Monera, that's for all the really simple-celled stuff, like bacteria. Protista is kind of a catch-all drawer for the more complex single-celled life. And then the last 3, fungi, plantae, and animalia, they're all complex multi-celled organisms, but they're separated by a really key difference, how they eat. Fungi absorb their food, plants make their own, and animals, we eat other things.
And what's really cool is this also clarifies their major jobs out in the world. The plants, they're the producers, making energy from sunlight. The fungi, they are the planet's great decomposers, recycling all the nutrients back into the system. And the animals are the consumers, moving all that energy up through the food web.
But, even a really solid system like Whitaker's has its limits. It turns out there are some fascinating and, let's be honest, downright strange things out there that don't quite fit into any of the 5 boxes. They kind of live on the very edge of what we even call life.
These are the outliers. They're not in any kingdom because they're missing the most basic building block of all life, The cell. They are acellular, which means they're these strange agents that totally blur the line between being complex chemistry and being truly alive.
So let's break down the key differences here. A virus is basically just some genetic material, either DNA or RNA, wrapped up in a little protein coat. A viroid is even simpler. It's just a naked piece of RNA, no protein coat at all. And then you get prions, which are the weirdest of the bunch. They are just infectious proteins. That's it. No genetic material whatsoever.
And to give you a sense of just how precise these things are, think about the very first virus ever discovered, the tobacco mosaic virus. Its protective coat is made of exactly 2,130 identical protein units, all arranged in this perfect spiral. It's like biological machinery at its absolute most minimal.
Viroids they're such a great example of how bizarre biology can get. They're the smallest infectious agents we know of, made of nothing more than a tiny, circular strand of RNA, and they cause a bunch of nasty plant diseases, like the one that can devastate potato crops.
And prions are even stranger. I mean, they completely break the most basic rule we have that you need genetic material like DNA or RNA to make copies of yourself. A prion is just a protein that's folded into the wrong shape, and when it bumps into a normal protein, it forces it to misfold too, setting off this awful chain reaction that leads to fatal brain diseases like mad cow disease. Which, of course, leaves us with a final big question. Any system of classification is really just a snapshot of what we know right now. As we explore crazy places like deep-sea vents and learn more about the microbial world, we are constantly finding new forms of life that challenge all our definitions. The library of life is always getting bigger, and you have to wonder, is it eventually going to need a whole new wing?